Chapter 9 The Office A table had been set up in the meeting room. It was long and narrow and included seats for 9. Derek sat at the head of the table with Catherine at his right. The supervisors took up the rest of the seats, still holding hands, with the two at the end of the line holding hands over the tabletop. "Why do human beings lie, friend Derek?" Supervisor Dante asked, his elongated, magnifying eyes staring all the way down the table. "The most difficulty we've had with you is your penchant for lies and exaggeration. It is what keeps us from trusting you completely." Derek licked his dry lips and watched them all expectantly watching him. He knew he'd have to get beyond this hurdle if he was to work with them in solving the city's problems. "Robots receive their input in 2 ways," he said, hoping his explanation would be adequate. He'd gotten up early to think it out and prepare it. "Through direct programming and through input garnered through the sensors that is tested in analog against existing programming. Your sensors record events accurately with mathematic precision and classify them through the scientific validity of several thousand years of empirical thought. You are then able, through your postronics, to reason deductively by weighing again through analog incoming data against existing data. You can make true second-level connections." "We understand the workings of the postronic brain, friend Derek," Waldeier said. "It is the human brain that confounds us." "Bear with me," Derek said. "I want to pose you a question. Suppose, just suppose, that your basic programming was an error, not just in small ways, but in its most basic assumptions. Suppose every bit of sensory input you receive was in total opposition to your basic programming." "We would spend a great deal of time reasoning erroneously," Fuller said, "but human brains are not at the mercy of programming. You have the freedom to sift through all empirical data and arrive at the truth at all times." "That's where you're wrong," Derek replied. "The human mind is not a computer with truth at its base. It is merely a collection of ganglia moved by electrical impulses. Truth is not its basis, but rather ego gratification. Truth to the human mind is a shifting thing, a sail billowing on the wind of fear and hope and desire. It has no reality, but rather creates it from moment to moment with that same creative intelligence that you value so highly in us." "But the base program is available," Healer said. "It is there for the human to use." "It is also there for him to reject," Derek countered. "You must observe your programming. My mind has no such chains on it. The human mind is painfully mortal. That particular truth in itself is more than most humans can tolerate. We are frail creatures seeking permanence in an impermanent world. We lie to those around us. We lie to ourselves. We lie in the face of all logic and all reason. We lie because, quite often, the truth would destroy us. We lie without even knowing it." Ravenous spoke. "How do robots that exist with humans on other worlds deal with the deceit?" "They follow instructions according to the laws of robotics," Derek said quite simply. "They are not autonomous as you are, so they have no choice. The laws were invented with the salvation of the species in mind. Robots protect humans from their own lies and honor them because of what's noble in the species. You saw Catherine's grief when she thought I was dead." He reached out and took her hand. "We are fragile creatures capable of great nobility and great ignominy. We make no excuses for ourselves. We are the creators of great good and great evil. And in the creation of robots we are at the height of our goodness. Our species deserves praise and condemnation, and in the final analysis it is beyond rational posteronic explanation." "You are saying we must take you as you are," Euler said. "No laws will define us," Derek answered. "No theorem can hold us in check. We will amaze and confound you, but I can guarantee you we will never be boring." "You would tame us with your words," Wheeler the philosopher said. "Yes," Derek said, smiling, "I would do exactly that. And I will tell you now that you will let me because the wonders of the universe are contained in my confounding mind, and you can only reach them through me, and you desperately want to reach them." "But what are the laws of humanics?" Rydberg asked. "Very simple," Catherine added, winking at Derek. "There is only one law of humanics. Expect the unexpected." "An oxymoron," Arion said. "As close as you'll ever get," Derek said. "That's the point. You needn't give up your search for the laws of humanics, but you must make them to fit us, not make us to fit them.
We can't be anything but what we are, but if you accept us, good and bad, we'll see to it that you reach your full potential." "Intriguing words," Dante said, "but just words. Where's an example of what you can do with your creative intelligence?" "If you let me," Derek said, "perhaps I can help save your city." "All of your suggestions so far have tried to force us away from our programming," Healer said. Derek stood. He thought better on his feet. "That's because until yesterday I never fully realized what was going on and how little control you had over the situation. I'm working on that too, but I have some other ideas." Orion and Waldire sat side by side, pincers locking together. Derek walked between the two of them, resting his elbows on their shoulders. "I've watched you digging in the tunnels, trying to siphon off the reservoir water to lower the level and avoid a flooding of your underground operations. Has it been successful?" "To a degree," Rydberg said. "We will break through after our meeting this morning. Unfortunately, we calculate that it will only postpone the inevitable for one more day. We can save our operations through tonight's expected rain, but that's it." "All right," Derek said. "Let's think about something. I was in the main chamber of one of the quadrants yesterday. Was that chamber dug?" "No," Avernus said. "Each quadrant extruder station is located in its chamber similar to that one. Our first action in beginning underground operations was to take sonogram readings to determine natural caverns under the surface. The mine tunnels were dug, but the main chambers are natural." "Has it occurred to you," Derek said, "to take sonograms now in the present situation?" "I don't understand," Avernus said. Derek pounded the tabletop with an index finger. "Find the closest underground cavern to your reservoir, dig a tunnel connecting it to the reservoir, and drain the reservoir water in there," Avernus said, standing abruptly and breaking contact with the central core. "Right!" Derek pointed to him. "Meanwhile, Catherine and I will be working on solving the murder. I'm absolutely convinced that the solution to the murder will also provide the reasons for the state of emergency." He turned to Supervisor Dante. "Is that creative enough for you?" "Happily so," Dante said. "It seems," Euler said, "that if we are to have the opportunity of putting friend Derek's suggestions into practice, we should adjourn this meeting and set to work." The robots stood, and Derek wondered if they realized that he had gently manipulated them, for the first time, into including him as a real partner in their planning. He watched them filing out of the large room for the first time, beginning to feel he was getting a handle on the deviousness of the mind that had brought all of them together. Synonetics, the worst hills still remained to be scaled toward reaching a truly equal social union of human and robot. Now, if they could only survive the rains, they could perhaps be the trailblazers in the opening of a new era. As soon as the robots left the room, Catherine hurried to the door and peered out. "They're gone," she said, turning back to Derek. "Good." He joined her at the door, Eve and Rec trailing dutifully. Derek turned to them. "Has either of you ever witnessed in this building before?" "Yes," Rex said. "Most of this building is given to experimentation on the post-embryonic brain and ways to improve its function. I have witnessed experiments in almost every laboratory in the structure." "Have you ever seen an office, something that a human might use as personal quarters?" "No," the robot answered. "Are there parts of the building you have never seen?" "Yes." "All right, listen carefully," Derek said, shrugging in Catherine's direction. "I want you to take me to all the parts of the building you have never seen." "I cannot do that." "Why not?" Catherine said. "There is a sector in the compass tower that's off limits to robots. No one goes there." "Did someone tell you that?" Derek asked. "A supervisor?" "It is part of our programming," Rex said. Eve agreed. "Not even supervisors are allowed." Derek shook his head. "Just like robots. All duty, no inquisitiveness." "I want you to take us there," he said. "I already told you it was off limits," Rex said. Derek smiled. "I didn't mean for you to take me inside the off limits part," he said. "Just take me as close as you can get and point it out to me." That seemed amendable enough, so the two witnesses led the way, while Derek and Catherine followed closely. They walked the maze-like halls, twisting and turning, but always going higher. An elevator took them 6 floors up, but that wasn't even the end of it. It was interesting to Derek. The meeting room had been designed to look like it was at the apex of the pyramid.
but it was actually only about halfway up the structure, perhaps the illusion being more spiritual intent than anything else. The upper levels had begun to get rather small, doorways appearing more sparsely between the gentle glowing walls and panels when the robots abruptly stopped. Rec pointed to a door at the end of a short hallway. "We can go no further," the robot said. "No one knows where that doorway leads." "If you want to wait here," Derek said, "we'll be back soon." "But it is off limits," Eve said. "To robots, not humans," Catherine replied. "But we cannot separate," Rec persisted. "It is only one door," Derek said. "We'll have to come back through it." "Our orders—" "Do what you want," Derek said. "We're going on." With that, Derek and Catherine continued down the hallway, turning once to see the attentive robots before opening the door and stepping inside. What they found was a spiral staircase leading up to a door set 10 feet above their heads. "You want to go first?" Derek asked. "Go ahead," Catherine returned. "I left my courage back in that sealed room." Derek moved slowly up the stairs, a feeling of expectation rising slowly in his stomach. He connected that word "butterflies" to the feeling, but he had no idea of what it meant. He reached the door and pushed the stud, expecting it to be locked up tight. It wasn't. The door slid easily and opened, he thought at first, to the outside. It was as if he were walking onto an open platform set with furniture and desk, a beautiful panoramic view of Robot City all around. But there was no feel of the air, no wind, no heat from the mid-morning sun. "How did we get outside?" Catherine asked, following him in. "We're not," Derek said, pointing behind her. The outside view was marred by the still open doorway, a black maw in the center of downtown. When he pushed the stud to close the door, the full view was restored. "View screen?" she asked. "I think so," he replied. "There must be a series of small cameras set around the peak of the pyramids to give the view, which is then put on the screens. Look," he pointed, "even above us." She looked up to see the pinkish blue sky above. "That would be the view from the platform you materialized on," she said. "Fascinating," he said softly, knowing they'd finally stumbled upon something. "If you were sitting in here you could watch someone materialize on the platform and they'd never know it." "Do you think someone watched us materialize?" she asked, eyes wide. He shrugged. "I'd have to think it probable at this point," he said. "We were brought here. We were meant to be here. It seems logical that our progress would be measured." "Have you ever considered the fact, Derek, that you were brought here in IMAX's package?" she asked. He walked slowly through the room. It was designed for someone to live in. There were easy chairs and a couch that converted to a bed. Not city robot material, but real furniture. There was even a plant of some kind under its own growth light. That told Derek that whoever kept this office returned at least often enough to keep the plant watered. "I've considered a great many things," Derek told her, "including the scenario you've just outlined, but there are several things to consider. I believe our meeting on Aranimus's ship was accidental. The situation was too dangerous and too uncontrollable to be otherwise, our injuries too real. But consider the facts that you admit to having known me previously by another name, and that name just happens to belong to someone who looked enough like me to be my twin. It's a large universe, Catherine. That's an awful lot of coincidence. Let me ask you something. Have you ever considered the possibility that the David you knew could be the one lying dead in that sealed room, and that I'm somebody else?" Her face became confused, lips sputtering. I. Then she started to say something and stopped. Derek would have given a fortune, 10 fortunes, to know the thoughts that had been running through her mind that second before she shut herself up. "What are you hiding from me?" he asked loudly in frustration. Her face was a mixture of pain and longing. She responded by solidifying, as she had done so many times since they met on Ryan's ship. "There's nothing up here for me," she said. "I'm going back down to the robots. Join us quickly. We have other work to do." Then she turned and departed, without a backward glance, leaving Derek angry again. He could feel so close to her and so far away. There's never any midpoint with Catherine. It was all one way or the other. He decided to inspect the office methodically, rather than simply tearing furiously into things, which had been his strongest desire.
Starting on the outer edges of the room, he traversed it slowly, saving the plum of the desk for last. He found a small, airtight shelf full of tapes, all marked "Philosophy", then broken down according to planet. Nearly all of the 55 spacer worlds are represented. They weren't of interest to him at the moment, but a pursual in the future wasn't out of the question. He continued his walk of the outer perimeter, his hand finding the ladder where his eyes couldn't. It was a metal ladder, set against the screen and lost in shadows. Even knowing it was there, he still found it difficult to see. It went up from the floor and stopped at the flat ceiling. He climbed it until he reached the ceiling screen. There was no reason at all for this ladder to exist unless it went somewhere. Gingerly he reached out and touched the ceiling screen above the ladder. It gave easily on a well-oiled hinges, flapping open to reveal real sky. He moved up through the trap door to find himself standing on the platform where he had materialized. Amazing. He began to put together a theory. Whoever started this civilization, whoever's arm it was that turned on 1-1, with proper use of the key to Berhelion, could materialize on Robot City at will, move down into the off-limits office and observe his city's progress without ever being seen. When he was through, he could leave by the same means. So the city had an observer, a guardian, who had apparently brought Derek here to sweeten the mix with the human ingredient. Why Derek? That question he couldn't answer. He wondered if the overseer had been present during his and Catherine's stay. If he had been watching then, perhaps all the way up to the moment they opened the office door. It would be simple enough for him to get away. All he'd need was the key and a few seconds' time. Derek climbed back into the office and closed the trap door behind him, once again sealing in the illusion completely. He continued his tour of the office by emptying the small trash can that sat by the desk. The trash can had several empty containers that he recognized as standard spacer survival rations of good-tasting roughage plus supplementary vitamin and protein pills. He tore open one of the roughage containers to find, in the corner, a small glob of the stuff which hadn't hardened completely. This food had been eaten within the last 24 hours. The rest of the trash was comprised of wadded up pieces of paper containing mathematical equations related to the geometric progression of the city building, which seemed to relate to the time it would take to fill the entire planet with city. Others seemed to be directed to the amounts of rainfall and reservoir size, quick calculations regarding how long it would take an overflow to occur. Dirk had the feeling that if he simply sat in the office and waited an indefinite amount of time, he could probably catch the overseer coming back. Unfortunately, he didn't have an indefinite amount of time. He put the trash back in the can and directed his attention to the desk itself. The top of the iron alloy desk contained a blotter with a paper and two GOG ink pens. The only personal item on the desk was a hollow cube containing a scene of a very nice-looking woman holding a baby. The sight of the cube sent a cold chill down his back. He turned his attention to the drawers. On the left were several small drawers, which were, for the most part, empty. Only the top drawer contained anything at all, and that was simply more paper and some technical data on the workings of the logic circuits of the post-ironic brain. On his right, however, he struck gold. As he opened the big wall drawer there, a slight motor hum brought a computer terminal up to desktop level, the screen already active, the cursor flashing "Ready." Interestingly enough, the terminal had all the hookups and leads for hyperwave transmission and receptions. Unfortunately, the power pack and directional hyperwave antenna were missing from the back, taken, no doubt, by the overseer. He stared at the terminal in disbelief. No blocks, no passwords, no protections on the system at all. He couldn't believe that an entire civilization would open itself up to him just because he'd found an office. Suppose he'd meant to cause it harm? Cautiously he slipped into the scheme of things, working his way down to the level of files, then asking to go to the central core. Once reaching that, he asked to open the file marked City Defenses. Within seconds, the ready signal was flashing again.
He was in. Rapidly he typed, "List city defenses." The computer answered, "City defenses. Advanced replication. Seal contamination. Halt central core input. Mobilate central core. Localize emergency terminals. Isolate supervisory personnel." He sat, shaking his head at the typer. This was it. He decided to try his hand at shutting it down. He typed, "Cancel replication." The city never hesitated. City defenses cannot be cancelled without justification and input regarding alien threat or contamination. Derek typed, "Override all previous instructions and cancel replication." The computer answered, "Override impossible under all circumstances. City defenses cannot be cancelled without justification and input regarding alien threat or contamination." It was a lockout. The computer refused even to talk to him about it unless he could determine the reason for the defensive measures and provide proper rationalization for termination. It seemed etched in granite. He typed, "List reason for city defense activation." The computer answered with a graph of the city, its shape ever changing, turning slowly. A tiny light was flashing in the section marked quadrant number 4. At the bottom of the screen the computer wrote, "Alien contamination" in quadrant number 4. Derek asked, "Site nature of contamination." The computer answered, "Alien contamination in quadrant number 4. He sat back and looked at the machine. It was very possible that the flashing light could represent the body of his look-alike. The machine wasn't going to let him off the hook on the murder. He was beginning to see why it was so easy for him to get into the central core from this terminal, and he received his final confirmation quickly when he typed, "List procedure for deactivation of city defenses." The machine replied, "Deactivation procedure. Isolate contamination or presence. Define nature of threat. Neutralize threat. Provide proof of neutralization through procedure C-15. Derek typed, "List procedure C-15 and was answered, "Procedure C-15. Isolate mobilated central core. Enter central core. Provide supervisor password. Enter proof of neutralization." Derek just stared at the screen, frustrated and amazed at what he was looking at. Nothing of consequence could be done from this terminal, or any city terminal, for that matter. Input had to come directly at the central core, and unless he misunderstood the word "mobilate," the central core was not stationary. It was mobile, moving, and to round out the entire business philosophically, a supervisor robot was necessary to enter the defensive program. It was actually the perfect defense. The act of shutting down the defenses had to be deliberate and calculated, and agreed to by both human and robot supervisor. Again, the system was set up synergetically, and Derek, despite his disappointment, had to admire it. Ultimately, he really didn't know the form of the contamination. The central core was behaving properly by not granting his request for deactivation until all the facts were in. The problem, of course, was that the city could kill itself before the facts came to light. He was back where he started, with the murder of his twin. There was still much he could learn from the office in the open terminal, but he simply didn't have the time right now. He reluctantly decided that he'd have to close out for now and return when there was more time. He had reached out to return the terminal to its berth when he thought of something. If the overseer were indeed keeping track of them, perhaps there was a file extant with that information. Not knowing his own name, he decided to go with another. Bringing the file name menu back on the screen, he typed in the words, "Burgess, Catherine." The machine answered, "Burgess, Catherine, C. David." His mouth was dry, his heart pounding as he typed in the name of the dead man. The machine answered quickly in a notation file, obviously set in the overseer's own hand. A simulation test on David number 2 proceeded online and without mishap until the triggering of the city defense system and the death of subject through unknown means. Without human intervention, robots are unable to prevent vital damage through over-successive city planning, and operation would be total failure. David number 1 arrived to intervene in city catastrophe and proceeded with original operational testing of synthetic theories, results yet to be seen. Uncontrolled factor arrived with David number 1 in the form of a woman. She is now calling herself Catherine Burgess for reasons unknown. Her ultimate influence over operation and the exact nature of her aims have yet to be determined. She will be watched carefully. That was it, the end of the file. Derek stared at the flashing cursor for a moment, his mind whirling with a dozen different thoughts. But one thought overrode everything else. One sentence burned its way into his brain and hurt him more deeply than he thought possible. She is now calling herself Catherine Burgess for reasons unknown. Thank you for listening. That's the end of chapter 9. Goodbye. Have a good day.